Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT ranked meta video. Our analysts are here to go through the 10-21 meta for each stage of the game. We'll cover leveling, economy, items, and a few compositions for the early, mid, and late game. Keep in mind that there was a hotfix patch midway through 10-21, so the meta is still being figured out. It has settled a bit, but there's still changes occurring and likely will continue to happen throughout the rest of the patch. With all that said, let's get to it. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Before we jump into the different stages of the game, let's first go over items for the current meta. Now that we're past the static Shiv meta with the hotfix patch, the meta has settled on a few top comps. Those are Ahri carry, Sharpshooters, and several variations of assassins. As such, what items you can go for can vary, but there are a few universally good ones to talk about. First is Zeke's Herald. The item was buffed in 10-21 by a huge amount and is an all-around fantastic item for the whole game. It also functions well in any build, though Sharpshooters make the best use of it. Another item to keep an eye out for is Chalice. Chalice was also buffed in 10-21 and works well in every meta comp. And the last universally good item to talk about is ZZ Rot Portal. Now that ZZ Rot taunts at the beginning of combat, it's become a staple on defensive champions, and in some cases it's good on assassins. By drawing aggro to that unit, you can cause them to cast early on in a fight, an example being Sejuani. Or you can taunt to pull assassins off of your backline, which is particularly good for sharpshooters. So that's a few items that you can build every game and get value from, but what about specific items? To answer that, let's break down the different components that you want to prioritize on the beginning carousel. For starters, it really depends on what your overall plan is. If you want to play flexible, you can play for generally good items like the ones we mentioned. That means sword, belt, and tier are all highly valuable if that's your goal. There's also decent defensive items to win the early game with, such as Sunfire Cape, meaning Chain Vest is a valuable pickup. But if your goal is to play towards more specific compositions like, say, Ahri carry, then you want to gravitate towards Glove. Glove makes into Jeweled Gauntlet, Infinity Edge, and Quicksilver, so it really covers a wide range of usable mid-game items. Securing it early can be a good way to ensure that you don't get stuck without a key item for whichever comp you're playing later. Rod can also be okay to pick up since you can use it for an early locket, Jeweled Gauntlet, or Rage Blade, but overall it has less value as an early component to prioritize. Really, the only item you want to avoid is Cloak. Even though it can be useful for certain items, it's never going to be contested in later carousels, so on average, you should always be able to pick up at least one per game. To recap, you can prioritize either universally good components like Sword, Belt, or Tier, or you can play towards specific builds by going for Glove. All in all, you should be able to get something useful early on, so you should almost always have an item to make during Stage 2. With items out of the way, let's move into the different stages of the game, beginning with the early game. The early game focuses on Stage 1, 2, and the early rounds of Stage 3. Let's go through each, beginning with Stage 1. There's not a ton that you need to focus on during Stage 1, as your overall goal is to just pick up pairs and try to hit 2-star champions. It is definitely worthwhile to pick up a Chosen if you're presented with one. Some won't be as great later on, such as Brawler Chosen, but others are high priority, so can really dictate how Stage 2 and 3 will go. For example, Duelist Yasuo as a Chosen is one of the best you can find for the early game. It also builds towards a Duelist composition later if you choose to go for it. Another build-defining trait is Sharpshooter, whether on Vayne or on Nidalee. While neither is really ideal as a Chosen champion, the fact is 6 Sharpshooter is insanely strong later on, so securing the ability to have 6 Sharpshooters can be game-changing. Moving on, let's talk about Stage 2. Stage 2 is all about playing your strongest board if possible. That means buying a Chosen if you haven't already and building around it. It also means that you want to level to 4 early, either on 2-1 or 2-2. Win streaking is the best option available during Stage 2 as it sets you up for a strong mid-game. But you may not be able to win streak, especially if you're not hitting upgrades. If you're going into Stage 2 without a Chosen or a 2-star, then you want to wait to level. It'll likely cost you health, but unless you high roll on 2-2 or 2-3, the chances are that you're just going to be getting weaker than others in the lobby. Sacrifice a bit of health to gain a lead on economy and reevaluate your position on 2-5. On 2-5, you want to level to 5. If you've been lose streaking and still haven't hit a strong board, then don't level and aim for a 5-loss streak by Krugs to maximize the gold gained. If you're win streaking, keep trying to push your advantage by playing the strongest board you can. Ideally, by Krugs, you want to be level 5 with a minimum of 20 gold. Since we're at the end of Stage 2, let's now move on to Stage 3. Stage 3 begins right after Krugs, and for the most part, 3-1 and 3-2 are still considered the early game. After Krugs are finished, you have a few choices you can make. First is selling your early game chosen if it's no longer providing a lot of value, or if you have plans of playing a specific trait later. For example, a chosen warlord is likely to fall off in value during Stage 3 unless you've managed to 2-star multiple warlords and can play 6. Selling your early chosen opens up the chance of finding a 2 or 3 cost chosen once you level to 6 on 3-2. If you've been win streaking and want to push your advantage, you can level on 3-1, but 3-2 is the standard timing. That said, it is possible to delay level 6 by 1 or 2 rounds if you're near or at 50 gold and can instead slow level. Overall, the goal for the early game should be to maintain as high a health as you can. Health going into the mid game is the most important factor for getting a top 4 placement. Next, let's move on to the mid game with the rest of Stage 3. The mid game also consists of Stage 4 and the early rounds of Stage 5. As mentioned, you want to be level 6 sometime around 3-2 to 3-5, with the standard timing being on 3-2. Level 6 during Stage 3 is considered a downtime period. Not much is going to happen here as everyone is simply saving gold and building their economy with the goal of leveling to 7 on 4-1. The main things to consider during the rest of Stage 3 is what items you have, what 4-cost champions you're presented with, and what other players have hit. This means you want to scout. See what chosen units other players have and what their economies are like. Check their items. All of these factors can give you a general idea what they may be playing in Stage 4. Before we move on, Stage 3 is also a time where reroll compositions begin to take shape. The two most common are Duelist with Yasuo 3 is the goal, and Diana 4 carry with Moonlight Assassin. A less common style is Nami 3 with Ludens, but it requires Nami chosen with at least one Ludens Echo. Since level 6 doesn't have much going on, let's move on to level 7 during Stage 4. Stage 4 is where the game really starts to pick up. The standard timing to level is on 4-1 after Wolves, though you can level earlier if possible. Try not to level later than this as others will be rolling at this stage of the game and you may miss out on hitting 4-cost champions. So now that you're level 7 on 4-1, it means it's time to roll. Don't spend all of your gold, but you will want to roll down enough to do 2 things. Find a general direction for your composition, whether that's Ahri, Assassins, Sharpshooters, or a different build, and then stabilize by hitting upgrades for those units. Stabilizing is the most important, which means you want a strong frontline and a good damage dealer. Finding a 4-cost or 3-cost chosen is also a quick way to stabilize. After rolling a bit on 4-1, you will want to scout and see what others have played. If you still don't have a direction for your comp, you can roll a little bit each round after 4-1, but make your goal to hit 2-star units to stabilize your board. Overall, the rest of Stage 4 is about hitting the units you need and trying to build up your economy to level 8 in Stage 5. There are builds that say on level 7 to roll for 3-star units such as Ninja, Assassin, and Sharpshooters. That said, these builds are fine to level to 8 on and instead roll for 3 stars then. Next up, it's time for Stage 5. Stage 5 is where the mid game will begin to end and the late game begins. But for now, let's focus on the first 3 rounds of Stage 5. On 5-1, after Raptors, it's a good time to consider leveling to 8. Only do this if you had a good economy in the latter half of Stage 4, as you don't want to all in your gold for no real gain. If you can't level to 8 right away, that's okay, but try to be 8 no later than 5-3, as the transition into late game is important for finding legendary champions. In general, the early parts of Stage 5 are entirely about scouting and building your economy to level 8. Again, some builds will stay on 7 to roll, but it's totally fine to have leveled to 8 first before you begin rolling. Level 8 is also the end point for a lot of players, as going to 9 costs far too much and rolling to stabilize is more important. The plan you should have for the mid game is to reach level 7 with a good economy and decent health. From there, level and roll to find a direction for your composition. Forcing a build does work, so you can always just level and roll to find those specific champions. After you've stabilized a bit, build up your economy to level to 8 during the early parts of Stage 5. And now, on to the late game. This will consist of the ends of Stage 5 and Stage 6. Of course, the game can go longer than Stage 6, but at that point of the game, you're purely playing around scouting and positioning. As you end Stage 5, you should ideally be level 8. At this point of the game, you have a few choices depending on what your economy, board state, and health is like. High health means you have a lot of wiggle room and can play greedy, or if your board state is weak, you have to roll to stabilize. Another benefit of being high health is that you can save gold to potentially level up to 9. But keep in mind, the majority of games you're unlikely to go to level 9 because it's so expensive, and rolling on 8 is usually just better. Lore health means you need to spend your gold unless you hit big upgrades and are winning rounds. Otherwise, roll, as you never want to end a game with unspent gold. Let's now move into Stage 6. This is where the game will usually close out for most players. At this point, you can level a 9 if you think it's going to give you a power spike by playing legendary champions like Yone, Azir, or Lee Sin. Otherwise, roll with the intention of hitting 2-star legendaries or 3-star 4-cost. All in all, Stage 6 and beyond comes down to positioning and scouting. Make sure you're never caught off guard by obvious things like Zephyr, and make sure you protect your backline from assassins. Leveling the 9 should really only be the goal if you can safely do it on your current health and get a major power spike from being level 9. In other cases, spend your gold and focus on positioning. That is all for today's video, folks. The second half of 1021 has been a much healthier and more diverse meta, so you can really play anything as long as you have the right chosen and items. Playing for a top 4 is a valid strategy, so always keep that in mind. Let us know in the comment section below how your climb has been going in the past few days of 1021 and what you're looking forward to for patch 1022. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.